Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of GTM in the Tofu Bowl. My guest today is Anthony Pierri. He is the co-founder and partner at Fletch, a B2B homepage positioning agency. And honestly, I love the specificity of that. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. But thank you so much for joining me, Anthony, and excited to jam.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited about this as well. Looking forward to the convo.
The first thing I have to tell you, I spend probably more time than I should on LinkedIn. Your content is the single best content I read. I was joking to my colleague, I could play chat roulette with your content, pick anyone, and we could just chat for 30 minutes on that. So it's so good. And I think what you nail is one of my rules is don't do something if it doesn't provide value. And I find every single post you do has value. So man, your stuff is great.
Well, thank you so much. That means a lot. It's our primary number one go-to-market strategy as a consultancy is to try to get people through our LinkedIn content. So we do put a lot of time into it. So I'm glad that it comes across as being valuable.
Is that driving the most of your demand today?
Oh yeah, it's 99.9% of our business comes from that. And actually, the funny thing is, people who work in the professional services arena, usually the lifeblood is referrals. And they really love when people refer them. For us, our referral clients are almost always the worst because so much of the stuff that we say is counterintuitive and kind of goes against the grain of traditional, what people would call marketing best practices, but I actually think are not very good. And so like when we get these people with referrals, if they haven't been reading our content, I'll basically say, well, how much do you know about us and, our point of view on things? And they'll be like, oh, nothing really, so-and-so just said you guys were going to help us increase the conversion rate on our homepage. You like the copywriting guys, right? And we're like, no, none of those things. And then, in the next 10 minutes, I have to basically pitch 12 months worth of, thought leadership and POV and get them to fundamentally change their mind. And so like we've almost joked around of like making a rule, we will not take any referral clients and just be like, why don't you follow us for 6 to 12 months and then come back? If at that point, if you still want to work with us, then great. If not, if you read our stuff and you're like, oh, I hate all this. And it's like, hey, then we saved ourselves the trouble and the heartache. Because sometimes it will go that way.
They can self-select out.
Yeah.
You had written a few things on like pre-firing clients, which I think is in that realm. And it's really top of mind for me right now because I think the one thing as a startup or agency or anything with small number of people is you have very limited time and resources. Yeah. And spending that time on the wrong customers is what kills businesses. And so we're trying to figure out for us in our world, it's narrowing our ICP. So who do we say no to? And those no-fly zones and saying no to people who want to pay you money is so hard. Has that been something that you have learned over time, or were you guys doing that from the beginning?
We came from a custom service agency that said yes to everyone. I've joked the ICP of the company was 2 factors. Do you have money? And are you willing to give it to us? And so that was about as small as we got. In 1 month, we were working with a Fortune 500 company, Procter & Gamble on a certain project. Also, we had a guy who was working on a Huggies diapers web experience. And it was to try to like get people to diagnose diaper rash with their kids. And so they were building this like web experience for Huggies diapers. And then we were moving over an Instagram influencer from a custom built software that she had done into Kajabi, which was like a creator platform. So in the same month, we were delivering those things. What's the defining feature of all those? They're people who wanted to give us money, right? So and that business was very, very challenging to market. I was actually one of my first roles I came from a long background not in tech. So I came into tech. My first role was as an SDR, and I was trying to figure out, okay, who are we going to go after? And it was like, should we cold call people? Should we cold email people? But it all comes back to the list. You're like, all right, well, who's the list? And it's like, well, anyone's out in the list, and you're like, okay, well, how do we frame our value? What's our differentiation? It's like, I mean, it's different for everyone. It's like a doctor going around knocking on doors and they're like, can I help you? And they're like, yeah, like what's going on? Like, tell me how things are going. And they're like, you knocked on my door. Like, what do you have to offer me? And they're like, well, I need to know what you're suffering with first. Like, it just doesn't work, right? So we came from this custom service land, and it was extremely difficult to scale it and in both delivery and in marketing. And so when we started our business, we took the exact opposite approach. We said, we're going to do one offer for one segment, and we're going to market it on one channel, and we're going to try that at least for 1 year. And that was this, like, they called it the 5 ones. This guy named Greg Hickman, I can never remember what the 5th one is. I can only remember the 4, but he should just rebrand it 4 ones. So we followed this methodology. My co-founder was a big fan of this book called Built to Sell, which was effectively, it's all about like building a productized business. It just does one thing. And what we saw happen was, when we did it from the beginning, it was a slower on-ramp to get any clients, because you're looking for people to buy the same thing. You're not just like, a customer service agency is the easiest business to initially get off the ground, because you're basically just pinging your network. What do you need help with? And I can help you with anything. So when we did it, we were like, let's try to find one thing. So it took like 9 months before we got a single person reaching out. And we were also trying to build the service and figure out what the right level of specificity was from the very beginning. But my co-founder and I, we would have this exercise we would always run, where we would go, he would pitch an idea, or I would pitch an idea to him, and we'd be like, awesome, business number 75. And then he'd pitch it different, and we'd be like, awesome, business number 90. Because like we were trying to reframe it and always keep each other aligned and focused through shame and joking around like this, right? Of basically being like, every new idea is in effect a different business, or you could think about a different product. Like, people in the service industry, they don't think about it this way, where it's like, if I wanted to repeatedly deliver, let's say, web design, it's analogous to saying, I'm going to spin up a factory that makes a shoe. And then they're like, well, what if we also delivered, LinkedIn ads? It's great. That's another factory that makes bicycles and has a different distribution. Like, each one of these services is just a different business line. Service people don't think about it that way, but that is in reality what's happening. So we came in being like, we don't have the energy to build 300 different businesses with 300 different, service lines and things like that. Let's see if we can just build one. And so it was this long process of narrowing. And every time that we would narrow, it would actually unlock more growth, because there's this weird flywheel that happens, especially on, like, if you're using like any algorithmic content, LinkedIn or Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is. It's like, when you find these niches, even though the niche is smaller, it's easier to be a big fish in a small pond in an algorithm than a small fish in a giant pond. Like, if you go out and just try to say, I want to become known for marketing, it's like, great, now you're competing with Seth Godin and New York Times bestselling authors. Like, you're just not going to win there. But what if you said, let's try to go and compete in B2B SaaS startups that are early stage, that are just working on product positioning as part of a homepage refresh? Maybe we could become a big fish there. And like, even though that feels like so narrow, that's a lot of people. That's hundreds of thousands of people at least. And we're 2 guys. We don't need 100,000 clients, to have a very viable business. So especially in freelancing, professional services, consulting, all that stuff, we're big fans of the narrowing and the niche. And I will never go back to a custom service business. If we ever add a custom service business line, we've talked about like having an agency arm. It will be run by a GM, a different operator. And I will say, I want no part of it. It could be under the umbrella, but that guy or gal, they can deal with all the custom scoping and delivery and stuff.
I have so many questions. Wait, okay. So how did you narrow it down to the niche that you have?
We had one thesis at the beginning, was maybe people would want to buy product positioning as a service. We knew that people like April Dunford existed. And we figured, given she's charging a lot of money, that she cannot service all the people who would need her services. Mm-hmm. And so we're like, I bet other people would need positioning as well. So then we said, let's go out and try to market on LinkedIn and tell people that we do positioning. And so what we try to be like very open about how we approach the framework. It's like almost like open source software. It's like you share everything, and then ideally people will pay for the implementation. Right? You show that you're an expert by revealing all the secret sauce, telling them exactly how to do it if they wanted to on their own. But most people are like, I don't have time to figure this out. I'm just going to pay you to do it. So we started posting about positioning. And what we realized was we wanted a way to evaluate other companies' positionings. And so we were like using those positioning Mad Libs, where it's like, we are X type of company for X type of customer, and we provide X type of value. And like, you have, all these different fill in the blanks. And what we would do is we were applying those fill-in-the-blank Mad Libs to people's websites, because it was just a public asset. Can we look at a company and figure out who are they for? What do they replace? Why are they better? And how many of the different fill in the blanks of the Mad Libs could we fill in ourselves just from the homepage? And what we realized is like, you could hardly fill out any. That most of the companies don't tell you any of the answers to the positioning equations. They're just like, we increase your revenue. And that's the only thing. And you're like, okay,
How?
how?
Sure.
What, and how? And all these foundational questions were missing. So we would post these like breakdowns of people's homepages and be like, where is it? There's nothing here at any of these things. And so people started reaching out to us, and a lot of the people reached out and said, I think I have a positioning problem. Can you help me fix my website? And we're like, interesting. Maybe these two things actually go hand in hand. The positioning and strategy and the homepage actually maybe are more linked than we imagined. So then we started trying to sell it and package it around. We'll help you figure out the positioning, and we'll help you document it on the homepage. And people like April Dunford and Andy Raskin, who are like adjacent style of service, they found different assets to package it in, right? April really does the sales narrative. Andy also does like, he calls it the strategic narrative. It's like an executive sales pitch that like, the two heads of the two companies would share with each other. So we found that the homepage was where it could maybe really live. And then it made us easier to buy and easier to refer, because there's a moment in time, whether you're working with a branding agency or a marketing agency and you're doing the website refresh, if you have heard of us and you've seen us on LinkedIn, you need to get the positioning right, or all the cool design changes won't really amount to anything. And if you're about to spend a lot of money, like a lot of times we'll see a company will hire us around Series A, Series B, and they will effectively ask us to get the positioning right before they spend all these marketing dollars, right? And we're like, great, let's come in, we'll figure it out, we'll get it on the homepage. That will be the baseline for all your ads and your outbound and everything, so that you're on the right spot. So that productizing has just been a continuously giving gift. Like it's just been continuously better and better and better in all these ways we didn't even expect at the beginning. Like, for example, when you productize and you just do one narrow thing, you become so much more efficient at it. And so you actually have to spend less time per client to get a better result for the client. So like the first couple projects we did, it was like 60 hours with these clients to figure this out. And the result was not good. Now we have this very standardized process, and we have the benefit of saying we've seen 400 of you. We know exactly where all the skeletons are buried, all the landmines and obstacles. So we spend less time with each client, and we have a better output. And because we've worked with so many companies, we can charge more.
Exactly.
So over time, the margin in a productized business gets better, where most agencies, as you get bigger, the margin gets worse, because you have to hire all these project managers, account managers who are going to do all the scoping. And so like the managerial overhead is always increasing the bigger you get. So like the growth of the company is actually at odds with the margin. It just gets worse and worse. And there's all sorts of problems, incentives being misaligned, like when companies are hiring by the hour for custom services, the company wants to keep the hourly amount the smallest as possible to keep the price down. And the agency or the consultancies, they want to make that as big as possible so that they can extract as much money, because they know it's hard to find new clients in this custom service way anyways. And so you get this delicate dance where you're like, all right, the first 2 weeks, we're going to do mood boarding. And it's like effectively, a $20,000 Pinterest board. It's like, did they really need that? Did they really need the $20,000 Pinterest board? Probably not. So, this is a super long and rambling answer. I often talk too long, but that's some more color to why we're doing what we're doing.
No, it's such a good story, but it's also so important to like, I'm sure at the very beginning, you weren't thinking about like the margin expansion and the efficiency gains, but the reality is the better you get at a craft and the better the output, the more you can charge and the easier it is. And all of those things compound into what you just said. Also, funny story I have to tell you quickly. So your whole Mad Libs thing, I was an operator, and then I went into VC for 5 years. And
Very
how
cool.
I ended up in VC was I was an advisor working with these early stage startups on all kinds of things, marketing and growth related. But one of the things I kept doing over and over again was taking these seed and Series A founders and literally shoving them in a room for 2 to 3 hours and completing the Mad Libs, because just getting people to agree upon what the Mad Libs was so hard. And then from there, it was trying to convince them that now had to flow through everything else. So I didn't get as far as you guys did, but it was funny because that was always the starting point. And it was also the starting point that most people couldn't agree on, and they wouldn't do it on their own. To your point, it's not complicated if you give them a little Mad Libs and say, hey, go talk to your customers, review your calls, figure it out. But they're not going to do it. It requires somebody who has that level of expertise. And to your point, that muscle that you built over 400 companies to be able to be like, nah, we're not saying that. No, that doesn't make sense. No, that's not actually what you can provide for your customers.
Yeah, totally. And the challenge that we've found is even just at the basic level of definitions, when we say ICP, ideal client profile, ideal customer profile, we are thinking of one segment. And when people say ICPs, like we'll have people come on the call and they say, well, so these are our 7 ICPs. And I'm like, well, hold on a second, right? Like we've already kind of broken the model if we're saying there's 7 ideal. And so like it comes down to fundamental business strategy. And we've evolved our thinking on this over time. Like we used to be even more dogmatic than we are now, where it'd be like, you must do it in this specific way. And we've realized that's not always the case. And there are companies that grow through a portfolio of products, like, Procter and Gamble as an example, right? Like they have all these different products that they own that have their own P&Ls, and that's like they're growing. The overall revenue growth is built on the backs of all these different products itself. So there's like a spectrum of how specific you need to get in terms of that type of stuff. But when we're talking with software, it becomes even more of a challenge because especially Series A, Series B, earlier seed, a lot of these people don't have the one thing that they're really known for yet. And I've used the metaphor of like a singer with like a hit song. If you don't get one hit song, it doesn't really matter how big and deep your catalog is. Like, well, we got these 4 albums. It's like, does anyone listen to any of them? It's like, not really. And it's like, you're not going to make 50 songs into 50 hits. Like there's going to be one hit that you want to get. And ideally you don't stay a one-hit wonder, but even if you are a one-hit wonder, you can create a meaningful multi-decade long, incredibly profitable business off of one hit, right? Like there's a company called Cohere. I've been obsessed with them this last couple of weeks. They are a company for health insurance companies, and they handle this one really painful workflow called prior authorization. That's all they really do. If you read their page, even though there's a lot of like corporate jargon and stuff because they're huge, it reads like a page that we would recommend an early stage startup to do. It's like, name the workflow, and they're like, we're solving prior auth. Then we're like, talk about the problem, and it's like literally the next scroll is like the problem. The prior auth process is broken and so hard to do. And then it's like, the solution, and it's like, use Cohere, and then it's like step by step. Here's how we solve the workflow. And they do $750 million a year in annual recurring revenue. And so that's one extreme. And there's a spectrum of like other Procter and Gamble style software companies that like take Stripe, has like 20 something products, and they grow from all of them, but they still have the payments product, which is the hit. And you could do this exercise where you could take any company in B2B, especially software, ask ChatGPT in 1 to 2 words, what is this company most known for? And it will say the thing that you already are thinking of. And so you say, what is Slack known for? It'll say team messaging or, messaging app or something like that. When you go on the Slack website, they're an AI.
Where work gets done.
Yes, they've got the great slogan, and then they call themselves the categories like, I think like AI workplace management or something.
Yep, sounds about right.
This is what always happens is like when you're trying to get them to fill out that Mad Lib, a lot of them want to fill it out with a future world where they're known for every single song, that they're like, no, I'm not a one-hit wonder. And it's like, you might be a one-hit wonder, but you could be like Slack as a one-hit wonder, in my opinion, sold for what, $27 billion? Like, that's okay. That's fine. Like that's a huge win. You don't have to be ashamed that you're a messaging app for teams. Like that's okay. You don't have to become a workplace management. And so that's like a lot of, the ethos behind everything we're saying is like, just be honest. Be honest with yourself, with the customers. I know you have to lie to the investors, to get the money. I get it. And I know when you get in these enterprise sales deals, you have to convince a CFO that adopting Calendly is going to somehow increase revenue. even though there's, it's literally a scheduling app. Like, how could that possibly ever increase revenue? I understand you have to tell that story. Don't hate the player, hate the game. I get it. We live in a fantasy land. That's okay. But in the marketing, just be honest. Right? Like, no one is going to get on the sales call with you in the first place if you're like, Calendly is going to grow your top line revenue. Like, what? That doesn't even make sense. So
that's also not the problem they're looking to solve when they're looking at Calendly.
Exactly.
They're looking to solve a calendaring problem, a scheduling problem.
Exactly. And that's the thing is, C-level executives in big companies, there is no board mandate to be like, your KPI as a CEO is number of meetings you took with account executives at software vendors. So you better get out there and start reading homepages. And so the CEO's like, well, I really care about the bottom line of the business. I'm being held to the profit. So when I go and evaluate all these software solutions of products I'll never use or see or care about, I'm evaluating each page to be like, does it say increase revenue in the H1? No, I don't need Slack. It didn't say that. And then like the marketing team at Slack's like, if only we had put increased revenue with Slack, the CEO would have bought us. It's like, what universe are you living in? Like, that is never how the deal happens. The C-level executives, they get brought in at the very, 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 very end. And they have to either say, does this seem legit or not? And the idea, at that point, ideally, you've built the business case with your champion at the company, and you're like, it's kind of like myth making, and you're sort of making stuff up, but whatever, that's the game you got to play. And then they say, what is it? What are we buying? It's this team communication. What does that do? Is that going to drive the yes? Look at these projections, and then they're like, okay, let's get it. That person is not your champion. They are not going to be out there shopping for Slack or Calendly or Loom or whatever your software is.
Well, this is actually something you had talked about before that resonated with me so much is your website should be built for mid-level management.
Yes.
And that is something that most people completely miss the mark on. And honestly, when I read you posted about that and I read it and I was like, I need to go back through all of our website and look through that lens because I know exactly who our champion is. It is a director of demand generation at a B2B company, upper mid-market. That is our ICP. Is our page speaking to them? And is that something that people, when you say that, people get it and they resonate, or is that something you have to convince people of?
Convince 100%. And I mean, the thing about why, and this again, happy accident, why LinkedIn ended up being a really good way to get clients. We didn't know this going in, but on the back end of it, looking back, so many of these ideas are counterintuitive because for up to this point, people had been thinking, well, I got to convince the decision maker. Yeah. I just chatted with my sales team, and they said that the CFO came in and killed the deal because they said they didn't see the ROI. So we need to get this fixed. We need to go out and promise that there's going to be ROI. And so overnight, all these, and this was like in like 2020, I can't remember, 2021, 2022, when like the bubble had kind of burst and all the belt tightening had started happening. And so everyone was like, we need to cut costs. We need to be efficient. We need to not buy all these new software tools. So then everyone's MO was like, you're getting killed at the last stage by the CFO because they didn't see the ROI. All the companies overnight flipped their homepages and they're like, increase your ROI, increase your efficiency, right? Raise your revenue and stuff like that. And like, to me, it's fundamentally misguided because like you said, they're not the one going on the website. They're not the one. CFOs don't take account executive call. They don't go on the website and book a call. CFOs are busy doing CFO stuff. They don't want to evaluate the scheduling tool, So it doesn't make any sense. But you see how they got there because especially sales, like let's say like high-level executives, CMOs are the most mistreated of the bunch. They get fired the most often. The adage of like the CEO doesn't get marketing, that's real. They don't get it, So they're looking and communicating with CROs. They're looking at the sales stuff, and they're only getting brought in on the biggest deals. Like Mark Benioff at Salesforce will still get involved with deals. Like they were trying to get Allstate to use Slack, like Allstate Insurance. Mark Benioff is like had the Allstate CEO up on the stage with them at some conference. It was like, we got to get you using Slack, and they're like chatting on the golf course. Like all the stereotypes are like kind of true. And so in these sales conversations, it's just such a different topic. They're talking about these things in such different ways that are so foreign to the vast majority of how deals begin on the ground, right? And like what they don't realize is that when you shift the audience, when you make the message about high level business outcomes, you've actually alienated all those mid-level managers who could have been champions for your product. Because what does a director or a senior manager not think about when they go to bed? How is the top line revenue of the business doing? Like, oh, I need to make sure that they're not even held to those standards at all. They're not even probably even aware of how much the company's even making to even know if it's going up or down. Like, they're like, I mean, I read the quarterly investor reports, like like 10K. I don't even think they're probably doing that. They're just in their job. And so when you flip all the messaging to reflect the conversations your executives are having, and you can trace these changes to the executives. It's never you're like, oh, we've got such a badass marketing team and they want to do this. It's no, an executive mandate from someone 7 levels up who's has no concept of what's happening, is basically imposing through all these layers of mid-level management to down to be like, we need to talk about revenue on the homepage. And then it gets up there. And now all the managers who were like, I thought that Airtable was like something with like app building and like operations like stuff, but I don't see anything about that. It's like digitally transform I don't know what this is probably not for me. This is probably like a big expensive enterprise tool. And then they're gone. And you just lost that person because you were so alienating, because you were writing for an audience that truly is not even there, right? An audience that in the terms of the website doesn't even exist. So like to your point, it is a convincing battle. And sometimes people come around, sometimes they don't. And that's back to that pre-firing question. That's why you have to pre-fire, because you're like, if you don't align with these ideas, we only have 2 weeks together. I'm not going to get you over the hump to get you to do it in 2 weeks.
Well, it's your content is convincing people, right? That is literally what it's doing. One thing I also just feel like is such an important lesson people have to learn at some point in their life or career is, especially as a marketer, everything is about incentives. So if you understand, for me, like selling to this director of demand generation, what are they incentivized by? Because the only way they're buying software is if I align with that. Or what are their KPIs? How are they being measured? How are they getting promoted? How are they looking good to their peers or their boss? Those are the things that you need to be promoting and tapping into. And if you're not aligning with that, they're not going to buy you. Yep. I think that's kind of rule number one. And I think people gloss over that a little too much.
The other thing, other thing I'll say is like just a completely other way that these things go off track comes from a very well-intentioned place. But if you take voice of the customer research, if you ask someone who has fully adopted a platform across all your parts of the business, tell me why you love the platform. They'll say things like, we started using Notion and it really is like transform every part of our business, right? It's really like just it's given us so much ROI. And they're like, let's use the voice of the customer. And then it's, transform your business with Notion. But you always have to ask, what did that person come for at the beginning, right? It's like asking, what made me go on a date with my wife at the very beginning? What made me say, I want to ask that lady out, versus what do I love about her being married 10 years? The answers are so different, right? And so to attract more people, you can't use the ending language because people are not even looking for that. Like most people, you'd be very surprised to hear this, a lot of people out there, but most people are not looking for their software to drastically transform their business. That's actually not on their list. They're like, I'm looking at your product. I'm hoping that it'll transform my business from the ground up. Like, do you guys do that? Bottom to top transformation? People don't shop that way. Supercharged, right?
Supercharge your business.
They just don't shop that way. They're like, hey, we need help with this one specific problem. And the salesperson is like, well, what if I sold you? They're like, I'm really looking for a bike. And they're like, do you want a boat? And they're like, no, I want a bike. What if I gave you a boat too? What about a car? Like that's the fundamental miscommunication.
I like that framework of you can't rely on the end thing. It's at the beginning. I also find that a lot of times with voice of customer, people don't ask the right questions. Yeah. If you ask a really bland, amorphous question, they're going to anchor on nothing because there's nothing that's like super specific. If you ask specific questions, you'll get specific answers.
For sure.
But oftentimes I find people just ask very blunt, basic questions and therefore they get very generic answers.
Yeah, totally. And there's ways to do it, right? Where you, like you're saying, where you minimize those risks and things like that. I'm a big fan of like you probably follow Pep and Winter.
Yeah,
He advocates basically like voice of the prospect, right? Like that's what Winter, you're getting to hear
totally.
what does the prospect think when they see this, and it is always just such a quantum leap away from what you imagine they're thinking and what they're actually thinking. Like, so anyone who really wants to feel bad about themselves but learn some important things about your business, check out Winter. Like it's a great platform for that.
Yes, or even now use AI to query like a dozen customer calls or prospect calls. Sorry, like
Yeah.
find things that look similar. So, like we recommend our customers do this all the time. Take the last 20 calls salespeople had with a certain segment. Maybe
Yep.
that's financial services companies or whatever. Listen to what language are they using? What are their pain points, common objections, questions they have, feedback on product. That is going to be so much more impactful than guessing or talking to customers. So I
Yep,
agree.
for sure.
Last quick question I have to ask before we wrap things up. You posted something that spoke to my soul, which was Clay is Zapier for sales. And I was like, thank you for actually posting this, because we get asked about Clay all the time. And my answer is always like, everyone overcomplicates the hell out of this. And it's like, we're going to do this crazy waterfall enrichment to get one field populated.
Yeah.
And I don't get it, quite frankly. I understand certain use cases, but it also drives me nuts how people think it is transforming their business when it's literally like appending one field. So thank you for posting that. I'm curious to get your take on that.
Yeah, and I don't even necessarily mean it in like a a derogatory way. I am a Zapier user. I love Zapier.
Same.
I think it's like back to like our core underlying ethos of just like, let's just be honest and open about the things we've created and not try to oversell them. And like we've been living in marketing hype for so long. It's like it's just so refreshing when people are like, this is kind of what it is and what it does.
Yes.
And I know that people who love Clay would make this would feel very offensive to them, but to me, I'm actually saying it as a compliment. You can build badass automations with Clay for sales teams, right? Like, and you could build a lot of the same things that Clay does in Zapier, but it doesn't give you the data sources of pulling from all the Zoom infos and like being able to get contact enrichment stuff to populate these. It's a very similar paradigm to me of like in the early days when Loom was coming out, where it was like a generic screen recorder. You could record your screen and yourself at the same time. And then Vidyard was Loom for sales teams. And it had like these specific features and functionality that made it more helpful. Like sales teams, when they would send videos to prospects, they wanted to show that it was a real person and not just an automation. And they would often take a whiteboard and they'd write the name of the person. And then they wanted a GIF when they pushed it in the email that's like them pointing like, look, I made this for you. And this isn't just an automation. And so like Vidyard enabled this GIF feature that Loom didn't have. And it enabled like all these different things. So it's like, oh, this is so much better. You've taken this big horizontal solution that can do anything for anyone. And you've given it all these very specific features that me as a salesperson would care about. To me, that is what Clay's doing. And I'm not saying they should adopt this position. Maybe they should, but like Zapier is like, I can build any automation for anyone. It's a horizontal automation tool where I can, and like they have agents now too. So it's not like, well, Zapier is just point automations and Clay has the Claygency or Claygent or whatever. No, Zapier has agents too. So we're all using automations and agents interchangeably. But like, if you think about Clay, like to me, it's like you are building badass automations. And if automations are a big part of your go-to-market strategy to be able to send these like highly tailored things, yeah, you could build them in Zapier, but it's going to be a lot harder and you have to pull in external data sources and stuff. What if you could just do it in Clay where all this stuff is right there? That to me is like a very honest way of explaining it that like, I think to people who there's a big learning curve and people who are thinking like, I don't even know what Clay is. I was listening to some guy from Clay was talking about the number one question people get on sales like that he gets on sales calls is people coming in and saying, what is it? Everyone loves you guys. What do you do? What is it? And then they have like long, complicated answers and stuff like that, where it's like, oh, if it's a way to build really cool sales automations. It's like, that's what it is. And it's made them a really, really valuable company that's growing really quick. Because guess what? People are trying to automate stuff in sales all the time. So it's not a belittling statement. It's just maybe more of a realistic statement.
And to your points before, take Slack, team messaging, take Cohere, prior auth. Those are huge companies.
Huge companies.
Being both honest, but also extremely specific, build huge companies. So
Salesforce is just a CRM, right? Like you go on their website, they're still leading with CRM. $300 billion market cap. You know,
Yeah.
you could just be the thing you are, and that's sometimes fine.
And that is their hit, right? That is what
Yeah.
they're known for.
That's the
That
hit
is
song.
exactly
Yeah.
right. Hit song. I love that. I always joke like my methodology is come for the X, stay for the Y. So it's like
I
you
like
come
that.
for the CRM, you stay for the entire thing.
Yeah.
But I like the one hit song, like the hit song thing. This has been so fun, Anthony. I think I could talk to you for about 3 hours. So we'll definitely have to do another part at some point. And man, everyone should go follow Anthony on LinkedIn. His content is A+.
Thanks so much for having me. This was super fun.
Thanks.